Friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Underwater in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called Underwater. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you, I'm also going to give you all the information on which OT platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, box office, collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this storyline, StarCast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end, so start the video. Underwater is a 2020 American science fiction action horror film directed by William Eubank. The film stars Kristen Stewart, Vincent Cassel, Jessica Henwick, John Gallagher Jr., Mahmoudou Athie, and TJ Miller. Underwater follows a group of workers at a drilling facility at the bottom of the ocean who encounter hostile creatures after an earthquake destroys the facility. The film was released in the United States on January 10, 2020 by 20th Century Fox. It was the last film under the Fox name before the studio's rebranding as 20th Century Studios on January 17th. It received mixed reviews from critics and was a box office bomb, grossing $40 million worldwide against a production budget of $50 to $65 million. In 2050, the Kepler 822, a research and drilling facility operated by Tion Industries at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, is struck by what is assumed to be a strong earthquake. As part of the facility is destroyed by the incident, mechanical engineer Nora Price and her colleagues, Rodrigo and Paul, make their way to the escape pod bay. However, the three discover that all of the escape pods have already been deployed, with Captain Lucien being the only person in the area when the three arrive. Together, they reach a control base and find biologist Emily Haversham and engineer Liam Smith, who are unsuccessful in their attempts to make contact with the surface. Lucien suggests using pressurized suits to walk 1 mile across the ocean floor to Roebuck 641, hoping to resurface from there. As they descend in a freight elevator, Rodrigo's defective helmet implodes under the water pressure, killing him. The surviving crew sees a distress beacon from one of the escape pods below, and Liam and Paul go to investigate. As they arrive at the location, they find a body in the rubble. A creature emerges from the corpse's back and attacks them. Liam kills the creature and takes it inside. Emily examines the creature and realizes that it belongs to a previously undiscovered species. The five make their way to the sea floor, but as they are walking, the Kepler explodes above and nearly buries them in debris. Liam is hit, but Nora and Lucien save him. They manage to get through an access tunnel to an intermediate station where they can charge and clean their suits. However, they find that Liam's oxygen scrubber is badly damaged from the debris. On their way through the access tunnel, Paul is attacked by an unknown creature, dragged underwater, and killed. Before the team leaves the access tunnel, they find that Liam's damaged oxygen pod will cause him to suffocate from the explosion's toxic fumes. Unwilling to leave another crew member behind, Nora, Lucien, and Emily agree to help Liam walk. The four set off across the ocean floor, but a humanoid creature appears and drags Liam into a cave. Lucien manages to get Liam out, but he is pulled from the other three. Nora is dragged along with Lucien, but Lucien sacrifices himself to spare Nora from the increasing pressure differential. Nora ends up at the abandoned Shepherd Station alone and is able to change her damaged diving suit before continuing toward Roebuck. Walking along the ocean floor, she reunites with Emily and Liam and proceeds to help drag the latter. As they enter Roebuck, they encounter a nest of humanoid creatures hanging from the ceiling and try to sneak by, but the sound of Emily's oxygen alarm wakes the creatures. Nora is partially swallowed by one of the creatures, but is able to kill it and free herself. The three manage to reach the escape pod bay, but Nora discovers that only 2 of the pods are functional. Nora and Emily manage to get the ailing Liam into a pod, and Nora persuades Emily to take the last one. As this happens, a gigantic creature emerges and attacks the Roebuck, while the smaller creatures follow the two escape pods. Nora, accepting her impending death, initiates an overload of Roebuck's nuclear core, resulting in a massive explosion that kills the creatures and allows the escape pods to reach the surface. During the credits, news headlines say there were only 2 survivors, and Tion Industries refuses to be involved with investigations into the events due to expanding its drilling efforts. Cast: Kristen Stewart as Nora Price, the mechanical engineer of the Kepler 822. Vincent Cassel as Captain Lucien, the captain of the Kepler 822. Jessica Henwick as Emily Haversham, the biologist of the Kepler 822. John Gallagher Jr. as Liam Smith, the engineer of the Kepler 822. Mamoudou Athie as Rodrigo Nagenda, one of Nora's crewmates on the Kepler 822 and the first survivor Nora finds. TJ Miller as Paul Abel, one of Nora's crewmates who survived the initial cave-in. Production, development, and casting. On February 22, 2017, it was announced that Kristen Stewart would star in Underwater, a film to be directed by William Eubank from a screenplay by Brian Duffield and Adam Kozad. It was revealed that principal production would commence the next month. On March 7, 2017, TJ Miller and Jessica Henwick joined the cast, and principal production was set to commence later that month in New Orleans. On April 5, 2017, during principal production, Vincent Cassel and Mamoudou Athie joined the cast, and the next day, John Gallagher Jr. was also added. In May 2017, following the end of filming for the film, it was revealed that Gunnar Wright was also part of the cast. After shooting the film, the director decided to design the alpha creature based on H.P. Lovecraft's mythos, as it features Cthulhu as the monster. Music: Marco Beltrami and Brandon Roberts composed the film score. Fox Music and Hollywood Records released the soundtrack. Alternate ending. In an alternate ending, after overloading the core, Nora makes her way to the damaged escape pod and rewires it, escaping just before the Roebuck explodes. This ending was not featured in the theatrical release of the film. Release: Underwater was released in the United States on January 10, 2020, and in UK cinemas on February 7, 2020. Reception: Box office: Underwater grossed $17.3 million in the United States and Canada and $23.7 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of $41 million. In the United States and Canada, Underwater was released alongside Like a Boss and the expansions of Just Mercy in 1917, and was projected to gross around $8 million in its opening weekend. The film made $2.7 million on its first day, including $500,000 from Thursday night previews. It went on to debut at $7 million, finishing 7th at the box office. The film fell 48% in its second weekend to $3.6 million and $4.8 million over the 4-day Martin Luther King Jr. Day holiday, finishing 11th. Critical response. On review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 48% based on 222 reviews, with an average rating of 5.30/10. The site's critical consensus reads, "Underwater's strong cast and stylish direction aren't enough to distract from the strong sense of déjà vu provoked by this claustrophobic thriller's derivative story." On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 48 out of 100 based on 37 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of C on an A+ to F scale, and PostTrack reported it received an average 2 out of 5 stars, with 35% of people saying they would definitely recommend it. John DeFore of The Hollywood Reporter wrote, "This is a creature feature whose gory jump scares and icktastic critter design are the reason you're here. An ensemble led by Kristen Stewart brings credible camaraderie to the scenario without quite matching the vivid chemistry of Alien and its best descendants. With such a tightly packed survival tale ahead of them, though, few viewers will be calling out for more character development." Owen Gleiberman of Variety wrote, "Underwater is a stupefying entertainment in which every claustrophobic space and apocalyptic crash of water registers as a slick visual trigger, Yet it's all built on top of a dramatic void. It's boredom in cinch-around review. Underwater diving into the January release schedule, unofficial dumping ground of studios, can give one a sinking feeling here in the U.S. After being spoiled by the extravagant riches of award season, a brief pack period overflowing with high-quality films crafted with care and precision, we're then given malformed byproducts, perhaps promising on paper but quite often punishing on screen. Previous years have offered the Matthew McConaughey stinker Serenity, the masochistically unfunny spoof 50 Shades of Black, and just last week, an entirely unnecessary redo of The Grudge. Filmed 3 years ago and finally being unleashed on audiences with minimal fanfare, the alien-aping sci-fi thriller Underwater is the most frustrating kind of January movie, one that's almost kind of nearly worth seeing. It's a good movie that got soggy, turning it into an average one instead. A script with blurred pages, ink seeping into one big murky splurge. The setup is simple and loosely familiar to genre fans. A crew of aquatic researchers are left in disarray when an earthquake destroys most of their facility. They're unsure what caused it, but they're concerned that the drilling team they work alongside have found something that should have been left buried. You know the deal. For a while, Underwater's brisk goofiness is, if anything, a refreshing palate cleanser after the more serious-minded offerings of late. There's an impressively ominous scene setter as we glide all the way down, accompanied by an unsettlingly sinister score. And once we're on board, we're thrown straight into the action as our heroine, played by Kristen Stewart, fights to survive a tense sequence of destruction. It continues to move along at a fair lick, and while for the most part it recalls better, smarter examples of the genre, the bare minimum is done well enough. But as the last act comes into view, so does a creeping realization that, that's all there is, because when the formula does allow space for innovation, the script from Brian Duffield and Adam Kozad sticks a bit too closely to well-recycled beats, originated in Alien and never far from our screens since. When the crew members inevitably start getting picked off, their death scenes, because of the film's mass audience-pleasing PG-13 rating, are largely incoherent. At one point, a character has to remind someone, and us, that a death actually did just occur. It's of course entirely possible to construct a film such as this with a lower rating in mind. But the script's insistence on including theoretically gory moments suggests that a neutering has taken place, and sloppy studio tampering has left the movie hopelessly defanged. The 3 years that it has taken for the film to reach us has aged it in a number of ways, but most notably in the decision to cast T.J. Miller as comedy support, a tiresome jester who has since been mercifully pushed aside by the industry. He's especially grating here, spewing unfunny quips to a cast of actors who find it hard to suppress their fatigue. It has not been a great time for Stewart of late, an actor who had managed quite brilliantly to escape the shadow of the Twilight franchise to become an intriguingly unknowable Arthouse darling. But her excursions back into the mainstream continue to be ill-advised, and while she tried her best to bring life to Elizabeth Banks's shoddy Charlie's Angels script, the film proved to be one of 2019's biggest flops. She's decent enough here in a role that mostly requires her to recite technical jargon and fix things while in her underwear, a directorial decision employed so often that it starts to border on creepy. Her character also conforms to the sci-fi rule that dictates that a female lead must also be grieving, but while it added pathos to both Gravity and Arrival, it feels tacked on here, and a late-stage attempt to add emotional resonance sinks fast. What frustrates me most about Underwater is just how very little it brings to the table. It's a solid, competently directed regurgitation of an oft-told tale that never manages to justify its existence. With a budget of around $80 million, that is not good enough. As I entered the screening, I was handed a scrap of paper that implored me not to reveal any of the film's surprises and plot twists. And as I left, I was scratching my head trying to figure out what those were supposed to be. The only surprise here is why filmmakers are still trying to remake Alien rather than trying to make something new. Underwater is the kind of no-nonsense B-movie with an A-list cast that Hollywood used to make more often. It's a lean and mean film that gets you into its action instantly and then doesn't release the pressure until the ending credits. In an era of increasingly long blockbusters with pretensions of greatness, it's refreshing to see a tight movie that knows exactly what it needs to do and sets about doing it. Anchored by another impressive performance from Kristen Stewart and really effective cinematography from Bojan Bazelli, Underwater absolutely bullies you into liking it. There's no time not to. Some of the midsection succumbs to incoherent effects, in which the murky setting overwhelms the ability to actually be able to tell what the heck is going on, but the flaws of the film never linger long enough to, sink underwater. Stewart plays Nora, a worker on an underwater research site that's literally miles below the surface. An annoying opening narration that feels tacked on by a producer during the film's delayed post-production details how time starts to lose all meaning when you're that far underwater. There's no light, and you sometimes can't even tell if you're awake or dreaming. Just about then, while you're still trying to find your seat in the theater, all hell breaks loose. The hull of the rig starts to crack and explode. Nora runs to safety, eventually finding other survivors that include characters played by Vincent Cassel, Mamoudou Athie, John Gallagher Jr., Jessica Henwick, and T.J. Miller. That's it. It's 6 people trying to survive a catastrophe that has killed the hundreds of other people aboard the site. No shots of emergency crews on the surface, no flashbacks. The escape pods have either been used or destroyed. Their only hope is to literally walk a mile along the ocean floor to another site and hope there are pods that work there. Then they discover they're not alone. Yes, Underwater is half disaster movie and half monster movie, combining 2 B-movie genres that I've always loved. As Underwater shifts from something more akin to the Poseidon Adventure to a submerged riff on Alien, the transition doesn't always work. But director William Eubank directs his cast to incredibly strong in-the-moment performances that hold it together. We need to believe Nora's plight, and Stewart sells the immediacy of her waking nightmare, well assisted by Henwick and Cassel in particular. On the other hand, Miller's shtick gets old fast, but that's the only weak link. The writers tack on a few too many manipulative backstories to try to heighten the emotional stakes, but that's commonplace in both genres on which Underwater is riffing. It also helps that the producers of Underwater tapped the eye of the great Bojan Bazelli to shoot the film. The cinematographer behind A Cure for Wellness and The Ring knows how to build tension with a combination of extreme close-ups that put us inside Nora's helmet while never losing the geography of where these people are fighting against incredible odds. When the movie becomes a full-out monster flick, Bazelli and Eubank could have dialed down the underwater murk a few degrees, but it's still an effective film visually, the value of which cannot be understated. Most bad B-movies like Underwater rely on a steady diet of jump scares and shaky camera work to disguise their low budgets and lack of visual acuity. What sets this apart is that there's an artistry to the visuals and captivating sound design. The film is filled with flashing lights of broken or breaking equipment and the din of metal creaking under the pressure of water. It's all necessary to enhance the tension. What I think I responded to the most in Underwater is its relentlessness. It's almost real time for at the least first chunk of the movie, and the immediacy of the filmmaking gives it power. Underwater discards all that on-the-surface nonsense that worse movies would have forced viewers through, in which we meet the characters and foreshadow weird happenings underwater. There's no time for that. Don't show up late. It's a film that's about panic, and how unexpected heroes can be made through instinctual response to adversity. That and underwater monsters. The final act of Underwater will likely divide some people, but I'm a fan of when a B-movie really goes for it, and there are a few beats in this one's final scenes that are impressively ambitious. My kids are at an age where they're fascinated by the idea that there could be species so far below the ocean's surface that we have yet to identify them. When they're old enough, I'll show them Underwater. Maybe they'll like B-movies too. Why, surprisingly? Well, First of all, the cast doesn't really have a big name attached to it, even though I actually enjoy some of Kristen Stewart's performances, who, like Robert Pattinson, has a few blind haters that haven't seen anything else other than it, while I, as well as a few other actors, Jessica Henwick particularly, then no director or screenwriter caught my attention. William Eubank hasn't done anything exceptional yet. Brian Duffield, a co-wrote in Sargenta, awful, but delivered a surprisingly fun horror screenplay with The Babysitter. Finally, Adam Coate helped to create some underwhelming narratives. The Legend of Tarzan, a Jack Ryan shadow recruit. In addition to this, I'm not in favor of films written by more than two people, since these usually disappoint. It's a January movie, so why was I slightly excited to watch it underwater? For the same reason a lot of people probably avoided it. It's formulaic horror thriller story deep at the bottom of the ocean. If a sci-fi film has a premise based on a team that works on a claustrophobic location and some sort of entity disrupts their job, I'm instantly drawn into those movies. There's something about them that makes me enjoy them more than most people. Usually this type of film has a low budget and really requires a talented director who's able to generate genuine tension and suspense. Underwater is 2020's big surprise. January movies are known to be Hollywood's trash bin, so I'm honestly dumbfounded that this film is far from being bad. It's very, very good. The set and production design are impressive, and they help create that isolated, suspenseful atmosphere. The first few minutes are nail-biting. The next 20 minutes are fantastic. The following 20 minutes continue to be a blast of entertainment. I felt continuously surprised by how good the movie actually... I still can't believe what I just witnessed. Don't twist my words, it's not a masterpiece or even a great film. It still follows a plot-driven narrative that countless other movies did better. It borrows inspiration from Alien, a Cloverfield, a 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and every other film involving an alien-like form threatening a crew. Plus, it lacks characterization of pretty much every character. There's no real attempt at deeply developing a single character to make the audience care about it. But this doesn't mean the movie can't succeed. Like I wrote above, there's a whole lot of plot-driven films that went on to be phenomenal. The difference between those and Underwater is that the latter doesn't truly bring anything new to the genre. It just uses the known cliches and executes them really well, which is itself a massive surprise. I can't deny that I had a lot of fun watching this thriller. I expected messy action with way too dark lighting, making it impossible to see anything. I received surprisingly visible, well-filmed sequences packed with tension, tons of panic, and palpable sense of urgency. There aren't that many moments to breathe and relax. The VFX team and dear Bojan Basilia, cinematographer, deserve a lot of credit because the aliens not only are visually captivating, but they are shown just in the right spots for the exact right amount of time. Underwater doesn't possess a huge budget, so the creatures need to be shown in the shadows to make them look and feel realistic. It might seem like an obvious technical decision to be made, but its execution is far from being an easy task. So kudos to everyone that participated in making the monsters a genuinely menacing threat. The cast is excellent. A Kristen Stewart that continues to break out of the wide to shell, proving again and again that she's a wonderful actress. Jessica Henwick is pretty great, as well as a Vincent Cassel. Everyone delivers fairly decent performances. Even a TJ Miller, who portrays the always divisive comic relief character that will surely be extremely annoying to some and quite funny to others. I stand in the middle. I think his character is fine. Hey, it's definitely a good sci-fi horror thriller, way better than most January flicks. Underwater is one of the last 20th Century Fox's movies, which probably means that a Disney had no clue what to do with it, hence dumping it in the worst month of the year. I just added the William Eubanker to my list of directors to follow. His commitment to actually make a good film is demonstrated on screen, so I really hope that his movie gains some sort of following when it reaches people's homes. Underwater is 2020's first massively positive surprise, a January film far better than most of the month's competition. A William Eubank delivers a remarkably well-filmed sci-fi horror thriller, filled with great tension, surprisingly visible action, fantastic production design, and some really captivating VFX work. It's by no means a brilliant movie. It takes inspiration from better films of the same genre, and it follows a straightforward, plot-driven narrative with close to zero character development. It simply uses the known cliches, but executes them really well. An underrated cast led by actress Stewart offers some notable performances, but it's the claustrophobic atmosphere surrounded by incredibly well-generated suspense that turns this movie into a success. Technically, I still can't believe how surprised I am. I just wish that it had a little bit of more characterization so I could recommend it even more. Underwater is the kind of non-nonsense B movie with an A-list cast that Hollywood used to make more often. It's a lean and mean a film that gets you into its action instantly and then doesn't release the pressure until the ending credits. In an era of increasingly long blockbusters with pretensions of greatness, it's refreshing to see a tight movie that knows exactly what it did. And really effective cinematography from a Bojan Bazelli Underwater absolutely bullies you into liking it. There's no time not to. Some of the midsection succumbs to incoherent effects in which the murky setting overwhelms the ability to actually be able to tell what the heck is going on. But the flaws of the film never linger long enough to sorry sink underwater. Stewart plays Nora, worker on an underwater research site that's literally miles below the surface. An annoying opening narration that feels tacked on by a producer during the film's delayed post-P-production details how time starts to lose all meaning when you're that far underwater. There's no light, and you sometimes can't even tell if you're awake or dreaming. Just about then, while you're still trying to find your seat in the theater, all hell breaks loose. The hell of the rig starts to crack and explode. Nora runs to safety, eventually finding other survivors that include characters played by a Vincent Cassel, a Maya to a John Gallagher Jr., a Jessica Henwick, and TJ Miller. It's 6 people trying to survive a catastrophe that has killed the hundreds of other people aboard the site. No. Shots of emergency crews on the surface. No flashbacks. The escape pods have either been used or destroyed. Their only hope is to literally walk a mile along the ocean floor to another site and hope there are pods that work there. Then they discover they're not alone. Yes, Underwater is half disaster movie. Underwater shifts from something more akin to the Poseidon adventure to a submerged drift on Alien. The transition doesn't always work, but director Earl William Eubank directs his cast to incredibly strong in the moment. Performances that hold it together. We need to believe Nora's blight, and Stewart sells the media. It also helps that the producers of Underwater tapped the eye of the great Bojan Bazelli to shoot the film. The cinematographer behind Day Cure for Wellness and The Ring knows how to build tension with a combination of extreme close-ups that put us inside Nora's helmet, while never losing the geography of where these people are fighting against incredible odds. When the movie becomes a full-out monster flick, Bazelli and Eubank could have dialed down the underwater murk a few degrees, but it's still an effective film visually, the value of which cannot be understated. Most bad B movies like Underwater rely on a steady diet of jump scares and shaky camera work to disguise their low budgets and lack of visual acuity. What sets this apart is that there's an artistry to the visuals and captivating sound design. The film is filled with flashing lights of broken or breaking equipment and the D of metal creaking under the pressure of water. It's all necessary to enhance the tension What I think I responded to the most in Underwater is its relentlessness. It's almost real time for at the least first chunk of the movie, and the immediacy of the filmmaking gives it power. Underwater discards all that on the surface nonsense that worst movies would have forced viewers through in which we meet. The characters and foreshadow word happenings underwater. There's no time for that. Don't show up late. It's a film that's about panic and how unexpected heroes can be made through instinctual response to adversity. That and Underwater Monsters do. There's just something about the mystery of what may be hiding in the unexplored depths of the world's oceans that grabs me. Like outer space, there's still a whole lot we don't know about what's way, way down there in the dark and cold. I do know this, though. It's the perfect local for a movie monster mix-up. Lots of dark and spooky nooks and crannies in an environment that can be just as dangerous as its ghillie antagonists. Maybe more so. While we haven't had a year quite like 1989 since, there have been a few notable films from time to time. AD Rising, A Deep Blue Sea, and the Mega R3 that quickly come to mind. These were all great, fun films that offered uploads of action, scares, and laughs, and gave us one hell of a good time at the cinema. And of course, there's been lots and lots of direct 2.86 A six-headed shark attacker or a Bermuda tentacles. Anyone. Sadly, the Dre has constituted the majority of content over the years, thanks to the insatiable appetite of streaming and cable services for content. So when I see a big studio has a new undersea horror on the way with a top-tier cast and big-budget effects, I'm all in. Goddamn the torpedoes, I say. Full steam ahead, and don't forget the popcorn. Underwater from 20th Century Fox follows a team of deep-sea workers who, after the integrity of their rig becomes disastrously unstable, are faced with a harrowing foot journey across the back ocean floor to reach a previously abandoned rig that holds their only hope for survival, with the workplace collapsing all around them, and the suits they need to make the trip technically not designed for such an outing. Things quickly become even worse when our intrepid team soon discovers that they are not alone in the murky depths. There's something out there, something big, something mean, something hungry, something that's never before been featured on the Discovery Channel. Now, before I get into the meat of this review, allow me to digress for a moment. When I go to a movie A, and I think everyone will agree with me on this, say my greatest hope is to be absolutely bowled over by what comes on the screen once the lights go down and the 20 to 25 minutes of commercials and trailers have run their course. To be honest, that doesn't happen very often. Not every film is going to knock it out of the park. That's okay. I really don't expect them to. I'm quite happy to plop down a few bucks for something that's a pretty great a good or a not bad, even if a movie is ultimately disappointing but gives me moments to love. I can be pretty forgiving. Hell, if some studio decides to dump pure cinematic excrement onto my screen, as long as I'm ultimately entertained by the sheer awfulness of it all, I can walk out of the theater without any regrets. To this day, I don't beat myself up over planking down good money to see a Showgirl and a Battlefield Earth on opening weekend. Witnessing their implosion with an audience was a treat. And it's always great fun to be able to say, hey, I was there when the topic of just how disastrous they were comes up. All I ask is this: please, please, please don't bore me. That is ultimately the worst cinematic crime of all. When I can't bask in greatness, have at least some fun with what I was given, or revel in the incompetence of it all, what's left to enjoy? Nothing. That's what. And I'm sad to say, Underwater bored the absolute hell out of me. There is nothing worse than watching something that seems to have everything going for it, but in the end, falls flat in almost every category. The cast is a good place to begin. It's a pretty solid one. We have a Kristen Stewart as the tough and resourceful heroine trying to keep everyone alive. Think Sigourney Weaver in Alien. Vincent Cassel as the no-nonsense captain who maintains his cool while his underlings are losing theirs. Think Tom Scaratina, Alien ATJ Milra as the smartass. Pink, Bill Paxton, Ina aliens, and a Jessica Haneke and a few others who serve either as monster kibble or someone for the bigger names to save in tight spots. Think everyone else in a Elena or a Aliens. None of these performers are bad, but as the old saying goes, you're only as good as what you have to work with. And they really don't have much to work with here. Nothing new anyways. Everything they are, everything they say and do is pulled from a myriad of other movies that did it much better. Instead of being wholly wrapped up in these characters, I was just sitting in my cozy reclining seat being constantly reminded of where I'd seen all of this before. Yep, I remember that. Tina, the Descent. Yep, I remember that. Tina, Mission to Mars. Yep, I remember that. Tina, Alien. I appreciate the effort they put in here. But the cast should be creating memories of their work for me, not bringing up recollections of performances from past opening weekends. Okay, how about the look of the movie? Those trailers look pretty cool. Well, the sets and overall production design were impressive, but it wasn't anything we haven't seen before. It's an underwater research drilling facility. If you've seen A Deep Blue Sea, Adam Mag, The Abyss, or any other underwater adventure horror flick from the last 30 years or so, it's pretty much the same places, different faces. Kudos to the designers who put it together, but it was far from inspired. And once the action moves outside and beyond the facility, the design doesn't really matter anymore. Everything is so dark and murky, you can barely see anything a foot or two beyond the actors. Be prepared for a lot of bumping around in the dark amidst clouds of silt. It happens a lot. So much, in fact, that I started to think it was being used intentionally as a means to keep the budget down. And what about the creepy critters? The biggest draw for this kind of movie. While the monsters were certainly menacing and grotesque, I was surprised at just how unscary they in this film were. There were more than a few moments where I gripped my chair in eager anticipation of what I was sure were going to be horrifying scenes of juicy carnage, or at least a good jump scare or 2A. But they all ended up coming to nothing. Things did indeed happen, but to say they were anticlimactic would be an understatement. There was one moment near the end where something is revealed about the creatures that had huge potential for coolness and terror, but it is so short-lived and appears so late. In the game, it only serves as a letdown since it has nowhere to go. If they had revealed that earlier in the movie and ran with it, this really could have been something special epic. Even I'm not going to say much about the direction and screenplay in particular. I think it's quite evident what I think from what I've already written. Like everything else in this movie, while they were both handled competently, both seem to have relied on copying what has come before rather than making it something of their own. The signatures of others are scribbled all over this from beginning to end. Underwater was a movie that squandered its sample resources on a story and characters that were lifted from superior films. It refused to be daring or, in the very least, put a fresh spin on what had come before. And while it was certainly an original film in that it wasn't a reboot or remake, it was definitely a removie. It may not be based on another movie, but it certainly feels like it was. There are quite a few movies that are quite a bit like IA Underwater, at least in that they center on a group of humans who encounter other worldly monsters, while doing some they probably shouldn't be doing, like flying around in outer space, for example, which Ridley Scott turned into the most terrifying thing on the planet with the Alien. And thanks to the template created by Alina and its James Cameron-directed sequel, most of those movies start off the same way by allowing us to hang with the crew before the goes down. But William Eubank's Underwater is quite a bit different in that regard, as it completely does away with the getting to know you portion of the movie to the Into the world of Founder Water on an ominous note, we meet Kristen Stewart Snora aboard a deep-sea drilling station. A cynical engineer who's clearly the film's Ellen Ripley from the jump, brushing her teeth and musing about her way of viewing the world in relatively awkward voiceover. More on that in a bit. Nora has no idea that something is about to attack the station and kill off the majority of the crew. And it happens within minutes of the movie's start, plunging us directly into an intense nightmare right out of the gate. Aside from TJ Miller's tension-breaking jokes that are initially amusing but soon wear thin, it's the same sticky employee in Cloverfield. Though far less charming in the wake of recent real-life allegations, A Underwater keeps up that intensity throughout its entire 95-minute runtime, stranding you down at the very bottom of the Mariana Trench with its characters and never letting you up for air. Those characters include Vincent Cassel's captain and a young couple played by John Gallagher Jr. and Jessica Henwick. One hell of a strong cast for this big-budget B-movie, and while our limited to non-existent time with the humans before the monsters attack ensures that we're only ever able to form a mild bond with them, there's something to be said for a movie that gets right to the good stuff, playing out like a survival horror video game, right down to a killer final battle that makes for one hell of a final act. Underwater is deep-sea nightmare fuel with barely visible monsters of barely this world design lurking about and waiting to strike at any moment, particularly once the movie forces the characters outside and in this movie's world outside means quite literally placing them on the bottom of the sea floor. Underwater is effectively terrifying, with the underwater bits having an almost handheld found footage style feel to them. I'm the kind of monster lover who prefers to see as much of the monsters as possible. And while I personally could have used a bit more monster action in this one, even I can't deny that there's something bone-chilling about brief glimpses of unnatural figures in the dark. Another thing Underwater could have used, if I'm forced to nitpick a movie I really enjoyed, is a bit more visual clarity down in the murky depths. It's not quite that you can't see what's happening, but more that you never get to see some really cool moments as clearly as you'd probably like to. It's a problem, if we're being honest, that most monster movies in recent years have had a Kong Skull Allen to not include a, but it's kind of hard to complain when we're talking about one that's supposed to be taking place at the bottom of the sea. After all, it's only natural that movie set deep beneath our feet doesn't feature bright lighting. If you haven't gathered by now, the gist of my review here is that the problems Underwater has don't ever derail what is ultimately a really fun aquatic horror monster movie. And much of that has to be attributed to a cast that does a pretty good job of making you care about characters that the writing often doesn't give you much reason to care for. Take the always watchable Kristen Stewart, for example, who's forced to bookend the film with out-of-place voiceovers that were clearly only necessary because the movie's structure never really allowed for any true character development. It's only through these voiceovers that we're really afforded a peek inside Nora's mind, as if the movie itself understands that it did a poor job of investing you in its main character. But Stewart is such a strong screen presence that it almost doesn't even matter, even without the voiceover at the end. In particular, we know exactly what she's feeling, and we understand precisely why she's doing what she's doing. The voiceover narration ultimately serves only to make a cool moment a bit corny. And while it's true that Underwater isn't exactly an A-plus film in the character department, the characters that actually matter in the end, and it's admittedly a bit of a bummer, which one ends up mattering the least, they do get enough development that I did find myself feeling something when all was said and done, if only for Stewart's character, who at least experiences something of an orc from the beginning to the end. Again, that's probably a bit more of a testament to Kristen Stewart's talents than it even is to the film's writing. Armed with a great score from Marco Belromi and Brandon Roberts, along with impressive set and suit constructions that will make you understand why, more than anything else present on screen, the movie cost $60 million. A not to mention, and I'm going to mention it once again, a really cool final act. Underwater comes out smelling like a rose in the aquatic horror Aliens inspired arena that I love so much. It's completely satisfying in the end, with a final reveal that takes a cool monster and turns it into one that horror fans say, and fans of Redacted in particular, they are sure to theorize and gush about for many years to come. And no, the redacted in that sentence is not Cloverfield, but it could be. And I can't wrap up this review without also mentioning that Underwater is the totally unofficial A Cloverfield prequel that mega fans of the Cloverfield ARG, myself included, have been waiting for. It's not even a Cloververse movie. And yet, it feels more like a Cloverfield movie than the two actual Cloverfield movies that were released in the wake of the 2008 found footage film. Underwater is a 2020 American horror movie starring Kristen Stewart, Jessica Henwick, DJ Miller, and a few other notable stars. It is a disaster movie, as much as anything else. Starting off with a crew of scientists working at the bottom of an unexplored part of the ocean, when there's a leak that kills the majority of the crew in the opening scene. The survivors proceed to try to figure out a way to get out of there as things get progressively worse. The thing about this movie is that it's extremely hard to review it without giving away the primary spoiler in a Sixth Sensey sort of way. If you share that element, then you risk ruining what was one of the rare genuine surprises that you're likely to get out of a film. At least for me, I hadn't expected the surprise and was really enjoying the fact I was. So, if you want to be surprised by it, then you should stop reading this review and instead go watch the movie called Still Here. Okay, then let the reader beware of spoilers. However, if you've already watched the movie or simply don't care, then I'll reveal the big secret. There's not only a monster at the bottom of the ocean, but the monster is Cthulhu himself. Yes, Cthulhu and a bunch of what I presume to be deep ones are very upset at having their resting place disturbed by a bunch of oil drilling scientists and are doing their very best to make them all dead. This particular revelation is extremely entertaining and I'm very glad about it. But I also feel like the movie doesn't go nearly as far as they could with it. It's always nice to see the big sea on screen, but he's treated more or less as an underwater kaiju rather than his cosmic horror self. We don't see any signs of a dreadful city underwater madness just by looking at him or cultists that might be working to further his return. Okay, there's some hints at such being the case with the Dan Corporation for Lovecraft Yan, but that isn't developed nearly as well as it could be. I'm sorry to say this is more or less a generic sci-fi horror movie with the premise of finding something alien that starts killing you. It's just got the thin veneer of Cthulhu added onto it in order to please depraved horror fans like myself. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, as I like most generic Sophie horror movies, and it's certainly a well-made one. I also think the addition of a thin veneer of talent and enhance my enjoyment of the film, however slight. Unfortunately, it also tells me this movie could have been so much better. It could have been the Prometheus movie we deserved. Prometheus was ruined by Ridley Scott making everyone act like morons, but these characters are all likable as well. As intelligent. How much better would a film have been if a competent crew was forced to go down deeper into the dark abyss as they gradually discovered the terrifying secrets within things related to the origin of mankind and its imminent destruction? Kristen Stewart proves she actually is a serviceable action heroine as Nora Price. Nora is desperately trying to step up to save as many people as possible, but thwarted at every turn by circumstances seemingly designed to make such heroism fruitless. Jessica Henwick's family is a very likable heroine who unfortunately has a romance tacked on with T.J. Miller's Paul Ale. If they'd been together from the beginning, it might have been believable. But this is not the circumstances to start a new relationship. There's a lot of good scenes, tense encounters, and excellent use of lighting throughout the film. I was a big fan of Epcot Center's Seabase Alpha that I was fooled for 30 years into thinking was actually underwater. Unfortunately, the movie doesn't attempt to do anything particularly deep or noticeable with this, so it comes off as a bit generic. Everyone does their best with the material, though, and the handling is always competent. As such, I'm going to say Underwater is an above-average horror film and certainly competent. Nora Kristen Stewart Twilight series is a mechanical engineer aboard the Kepler, the control center of a deep-sea drilling expedition in the fabled Mariana Trench. The titular monster tool is the Roebuck, aka the biggest drill in the history of ever, designed to bore out insane amounts of Earth in search of material riches. Before you can blink, the entire structure is struck by what the crew first believes to be an earthquake. Nora rarely escapes the rapidly collapsing edifice with Rodrigo May to aid the circle rescuing Paul D.J. Miller Deadpool 2 on the way to meet up with Emily. Jessica Hanna Game of Thrones Smith, John Gallagher Jr. 10 Cloverfield Lane, and Captain Lucy and Vincent Cassel Black Swan. The remaining survivors are faced with two undeniable truths. Their only hope is a miles-long walk across the trench floor or a broken bar, and it wasn't an earthquake that struck their rig. As a Lovecraft devotee, I'm always down for a good deep-sea horror flick. I also had a rather terrifying thing happen to me at Myrtle Beach when I was about 8 or 9, where I drifted out too far and had to be brought back in after a small trip out to sea. So yeah, aquatic horror has an effect on me. I'm pretty Teflon when it comes to being scared by virtually all types of horror, but the ocean freaks me out. That's my confession of weakness. You're welcome. Underwater wastes no time in turning the tension and intensity up to 11. The getting to know you period of base character development is completely thrown out the window in favor of an exploding nightmare at the 3-minute mark, and it's a lovely move for both pacing and shock value. The characters here are archetypes at best, paper thin at worst. For that matter, the story beats and visual hallmarks. Stewart spends a lot of time rippling it up in her underwear. For example, are all shallow or cribbed from other films. It's a very unoriginal film in those regards. It even comes complete with the "we don't belong down here" broken bar. We are meddling with things best left alone theme. The funny part is that Underwater does all the things it needs to do right and proper. The tension stays nice and taut throughout 95-minute runtime. The creature FX1 practical and a ton of V. Effects are suitably Lovecraftian and menacing. The trench floor setting is every bit as dark as you'd think, but it's not dark on the level of, say, the Battle of Winterfield. There are plenty of light flashes and underwater lights to keep the horror just visible enough. The set design, both in the suits and the rig interiors, are straight out of the late A80s aquatic craze of films like Deep Star 6, Leviathan, and The Abyss. If anything, Underwater is equal parts homage and throwback to that Hollywood trend. The biggest accomplishment of Underwater is technical competence, brisk pace, and solid tension throughout. The biggest surprise is how likable Kristen Stewart is in a blatant Ripley ripoff. She's always low-key terrified, but she grits her teeth and plows forward with the sign, the ghost of a grin. It's the first time I've ever been impressed by her nuances and skill. That's a relief, too. You don't want to label someone with just their early work. No one should have to live under the shadow of Twilight for their whole career. She gives a damn fine performance here, and deserves recognition for it. Deep-sea creature features tend to take a lot of guff for trying to be alien, but wet. I, for one, have zero problem with that. Space is hazardous, and the deepest reaches of our terrestrial oceans are equally harrowing in many of the same ways. So if movies like E. Leviana and A Deep Star Seeker, people often throw in the Abyssa to concoct the trilogy, but James Cameron's movie is in a whole other stratosphere. Want to make Alien at the bottom of the sea rifts? I am here for that. Director William Eubank's Underwater definitely falls into this category, and it's precisely as shitty and awesome as this I wanted it to be. Underwater already has a few checks against it in the public perception. It's an early January release. It's an early January horror release. It looks like absolute trash, and it's been delayed time and time again. Principal photography wrapped up in 2017, and it has all the hallmarks of a movie the studio has written off and is dumping in a cinematic dead zone, hoping to recoup at least a portion of the cost. With the budget of $80 million, there are obvious signs of studio tinkering and interference. It's messy and jumbled and rushed and feels like it starts in the second reel. Underwater also kind of rules. Sure, a Brian Duffield and Adam Kosid script cribs from the Submerged Monster movies, already mentioned, as well as a Descent Lovecraftian mythos in Ridley Scott's 1979 classic. But that's not a bad thing. If you're going to steal from the best. Part of the benefit of starting in Act 2 is that the movie hits the ground running and doesn't stop. And with good reason. There are plot holes and gaps and things that would make an audience pause if there was any time. It wastes precious little space on background or science or character. And when it tries, that's when the momentum flags. Plus, there are monsters and Kristen Stewart getting the chance to do her best Triply impersonation. The plot revolves around the crew of a drilling station at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the deepest spot on Earth. It's dark and cold and isolated, and like 3 minutes in, there's an earthquake or something. The facility takes critical damage and a handful of crew members, Sonora. Stewart, the captain, Vincent Cassel, Paul, DJ Miller, Emily, Jessica Henwick, Rodrigo Mayu, Ian Smith, John Gallagher Jr. must find a way to survive and escape. It's standard contained horror. Place a limited group of characters in a hostile environment. Put a ticking clock on the situation. Make every move potentially deadly. And make things worse with every step. We're talking escalating tension 101. But combined with a frantic posse just when the characters think they can rest for a moment. Everything goes to hell up. It works well enough to ratchet up the pressure. And there are monsters. Where they come from? Who knows? And who really cares? The movie certainly doesn't. The opening credits are clip show of news articles about mysterious events and strange anomalies plaguing this project. We get allusions, oblique, aids and hints, but never any real answers. Was this actually an earthquake? Maybe it was something else. Whoa, it's enough to start the ball rolling. Stripped down to the bare components as it is. We see snippets of the broader story underwater excised along the way. The movie begins with voiceover from Nora talking about how the isolation messes with the mind. She has a past she's running from and maybe she's losing her grief up. It's implied she's been down there much longer than others. It's the same with the rest of the characters. So brief mentions of life outside of this moment, but nothing else. It would be fascinating to read the original script and see what the creators intended this to become. Throughout the movie, you can point to moments where there used to be more, but it's gone now. The strategy of letting us learn about a character by their actions under duress can work. It just doesn't hear outside of Nora. There's no one even remotely interesting. Stewart does what she can to create some texture and personality, which is much more than another actor might be able to achieve. But in the end, she's still a shadow of what Hollywood thinks a strong female action hero has to be. For example, a Ripley clone, and they still find excuses to show her in her underwear as much as possible. Cassel sleepwalks through his role as the stalwart captain. There are worse people to watch. Phone in a part, but there's nothing particularly engaging about him. As one might expect, Miller provides the comic relief, or at least the tired, toothless attempt. So, there's a 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, a joke where his delivery feels like him asking, "Do I have to say this?" His usual dead pants arc plays Like he absolutely does not give a and can't wait until the moment his character gets to die so he can leave. All of the various issues aside, Underwater's biggest problems are mechanical. It looks and sounds like absolute garbage, not the score. The music from Marco Belromi and Brandon Roberts actually kicks a lot of ass in a John Carpenter Under the Sea kind of way. However, so much of the movie takes place with the characters in heavy suits, talking over crackling comms. The dialogue ends up garbled and muted and almost impossible to decipher at times. It's probably very realistic and true to the circumstances, but it's less than ideal as a viewing experience. The same can be said about the visual aesthetic. Most of the movie takes places as the characters walk along the bottom of the ocean. We get it. It's dark and murky and hard to see. And again, the movie captures this in what's probably a somewhat realistic way, but it sucks to watch. Instead of creating a claustrophobic, disorienting effect, it's murky and muddy, which makes much of the action incoherent, ugly, grubby shades of blue and gray all blend into one amorphous blob. Even the style monsters, which could have been cool, fade into the background a little more. Then blurry smudges. All of this is a shame because one of the strengths of William Eubank's previous film, the 2014 indie sci-fi Tonia, The Signal, is how it looks. It's a crisp, clean movie with clear, articulate action. We see glimpses of that inside the drilling facility, but everything outside of that, the bulk of the runtime, looks like it was filmed in a closet with digital effects rendered on a dying laptop. Despite myriad egregious problems that are sure to turn off many viewers, I had a damn fine time with Underwater. Even that title is uninspired. At 95 minutes, it probably could have trimmed even further. And the studio meddling adds a few asinine touches. But while it's shitty in a really fun way. I totally appreciate. On this week's edition of Movies. I'm glad I waited this long to watch Ice Underwater. I don't think I've seen a film that tried so hard that it ended up doing nothing. In hindsight, I'm not sure what I was expecting from William Eubank, the guy who directed A Paranormal Activity Next of Ken, and Brian Duffield, the guy who wrote The Babysitter and directed The No One. Will save you. Underwater had all of the fixings to be a Brendan movie. It's depth-sea horror, Lovecraftian creatures, Kristen Stewart and Vincent Cassel. The final product is an arduous 95-minute more people should have died fast. Even Stewart and Cassel couldn't save this sinking ship. Literally, a group of researchers are aboard the Kepler 822 when disaster strikes. Supposedly, an earthquake hits the Kepler, causing extreme depressurization and stranding the surviving researchers near the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Nora Price, Kristen Stewart, finds herself as the decision-maker and whisks a few crew members to safety. Unfortunately for all of us, one of the crew members is Paul, DJ Miller, Nora, and Captain Lucy, and Vincent Cassel. Must find a way to get the rest of their crew to one of the few remaining escape pods, lest they find themselves resting in Davy Jones' locker for eternity. Soon the tables turned when the Kepler crew realizes a potential earthquake is the very least of their problems. Let's get the three positives out of the way. Firstly, Case 2 and Daddy Castle. I'm Hal, young enough to have been in middle school when Theot will lie to Kristen Stewart. Grace was heavy. As a cool kid, I stupidly cast off Kristen Stewart as a bad actor who took bad roles. Recent films like He, a Personal Shopper, 8 Crimes of the Future, and The Love Lies Bleeding have rightfully changed my opinion. Also, as a cool and edgy film school kid, I became obsessed with Vincent Castellina Hain. Seeing these two actors work with each other was an on-screen match I wanted, but didn't deserve. Both actors ooze charisma and chew up their scenes in the best way possible. Secondly, the cinematography. Bojan Baselli's Sugar Hill: A Cure for Wellness visually saves this film from Eubank's milquetoast directing. Baselli captures the claustrophobic Kepler beautifully. The scenes of the crew underwater are full of dread and suspense. Thirdly, the creature. It's monster mayhem. We have to talk about the creatures. Was the creature released upon the world from the earthquake, or was it caused by drilling from the black? Kepler, it doesn't really matter. All that does matter is she's here and she's big. How the creature comes to target. Our surviving crew members works incredibly well, and maybe the only good thing to come from Duffield's script. The mother creature is godly and truly terrifying, while her drones come in endless waves and fill both the crew members and the audience with indescribable dread. Those three things were nowhere near enough to save you. Underwater. First off, we have to talk about spiders. But Brendan, we're not underwater. Exactly. Nora starts the film by watching a spider in a sink train. How exactly did this spider get back to the bottom of the Mariana Trench? Perchance. Is there a researcher on the Kepler who is doing spider research? Who knows? Certainly not D-Field. Next up, DJ Miller, as he's been typecast. Miller plays a misogynistic, try-hard, self-obsessed comedian as he always does. Athoe, that Senat, really, considerate acting for him. Do a hey. Or how about the effect that the Kepler was built with an option to weaponized Sina? Power source. Seriously, what engineer would add that feature into the Kepler? Underwater doesn't really waste a lot of time for the disaster to hit, as we are watching Nora all alone getting ready for her day miles under the water and working on a drilling station. An explosion and everything appears to be crashing down around her. She last battled to survive and make a choice when to close a door with people not making it. Then attempting to get to escape pods and finding a few other survivors on the way, as well as the captain, which you would think is a good thing. Paul is easily the best and most likable character who added some much-needed humor at times. I really wanted to like and enjoy this film, but it was just lacking so many things for the style for me to even like it a little bit. Considering it has a 95-minute running time, you would think that would be great, but I was bored throughout. Just show the creatures a little bit better. I get that you are underwater, and it would be very dark, but when you can hardly see what's going on, I was then lost with the point the film was trying to make. At times, you had to keep reminding yourself that they were under the water and not in space. Even though it took that familiar format and basically turned it all upside down, the creatures were very strange, which you can easily compare to any type of alien we have seen over the years. It just lacked substance, in my opinion, and I was left just feeling empty when watching it. In terms of the characters, we didn't really know a massive amount about them. Just odd, small details given over the course of the film, which meant that we didn't really care about the outcome. As harsh as that sounds, when they are battling to survive, you have to want to see them win. The tension built up when moving between the different areas was okay, albeit predictable. Performance-wise, I have already mentioned that Paul was the best character played by DJ Miller, and he was probably the standout, really. I am still very much on the fence with Kristen Stewart. I do watch her different films, but everything still feels very wooden. This goes after watching The Runaways a few weeks ago. Never seems to be any change of emotion with the change in roles. Alien and AOV seem to be making a huge comeback as of late. And I got to admit, I'm weirdly enjoying seeing just what people do as part of their homage to the classic space horror. Just since starting this blog, I've run into a live, which was a Alina without the female protagonist, and an ending that might be one of my favorite surprise endings in recent years. Then there was Cloverfield Paradox, which I Alina if it was a ship trying to kill them all instead of an Aina creature, and I was certainly a little too nice to it back then. I was early in my reviewing life. Well, the new entry into Alien except a broken bar is underwater, which I accept it takes place at the bottom of the ocean. The reason the film takes place at the bottom of the ocean is because the underwater takes place on a deep-sea mining vessel run by a team of scientists. The main scientist who will be following is Nora Price, Kristen Stewart, who seems to be the electronics. But we really don't get a chance to know much about the crew and what they do before the vessel they're on suffers. from some extreme damage and begins to crumble around them. The crew's only chance of surviving is to walk along the ocean floor to another nearby station where there might be some escape pods. They just have to do this while dealing with the intense water pressure that could crush them at any second, a lack of oxygen, and a weird underwater creature that keeps popping up. Taking Alina and putting it underwater is a genuinely fascinating idea because it introduces a lot of new dangers that weren't in the original. Death by extreme pressure wasn't something I expected to happen in Alien, but the underwater sets up quickly that it could happen at any second. In fact, underwater is pretty good at setting up the danger as quickly as humanly possible because it only has an hour and a half, and you need to be constantly wondering when something's going to crash our main characters. The film wastes no time whatsoever, almost cutting the entire concept down to the bare bones of what's needed in this kind of movie. Its tension and violence slowly ratchet up, and anyone and everyone could die at any moment, and that's genuinely terrifying. A broken bar if I cared about any of these characters, but because the first time we meet most of them is while they're frantically running for their lives. One of them is Noted the Bomb. Threat maker and transphobic is Sat TJ Miller, so I'm not exactly going to feel sorry when his entire character seems to be TJ Miller is somehow permitted to be in movies and ad lib whatever resembles a character. His presence brings the film down substantially for me because I do not like him, so your mileage may vary. There in general, this film does suffer from trying to be alien underwater, and sometimes that works in their favor. Sometimes you can almost see where someone took the original Alien scene and scribbled, but it's wet in the margins to signify the new location. The scene where they find and bring the underwater creature on board just looks like an alternate take from a much better movie, with much better characters, and a more intimidating and memorable villain. Not that this film isn't good, it's very good, but when you look at the great film, it's clearly copied. You can see how little has been changed here. Underwater takes a talented group of individuals into a desolate place that is constantly pressurizing. And at its very core, you can feel that pressure continues to build not only in the film, but in your own head as well. As someone who loves anxious thrillers, I was looking forward to this film. The trailers seem eerie enough. And Kristen Stewart, coming off her Actress of the Decade award by the Hollywood Critics Association, became a huge draw for me. She has been almost on the same path as Robert Pattinson over the years, doing smaller projects to regain not only her status in Hollywood, but her confidence as well. However, unlike Robert Pattinson, she has not been as strong when it comes to choosing projects to work on. This is another dud for her, and one that was so egregious, I almost left. 3 people did. This movie proved to be one of the most incohesive films I have seen in a long time. Characters come in and leave out of nowhere, and the sheer lack of characterization refuses to let the audience get to know any of them aside from the surface level. Even when we begin to hear about one of the crew members' families, he doesn't even seem to remember the age of his daughter. Maybe this is done in some stylistic way to showcase how he has been down in the water for so long that he can't even remember personal things. But for me, it created a separation between the characters and the actors that I just could not get past. The film does not just peel back on attempting to create any sort of character on screen, but they physically strip down some of the female characters and puts them in situations that make no sense for them to have on what they do. For an entire chunk of this film, Kristen Stewart is seen in nothing but her bra and panties, but the rest of the crew can have shirts on. It was moments like this and the fact that TJ Miller's character called her flat-chested elf as she was trying to remove rubble from him in a dire situation. There were times where the characters did not feel like they were worried about the situation. So as an audience member, why would I be worried? And that brings me to the biggest issue I had with this film in total, is that I just did not care. I did not care for these characters or even for this situation they are in, because we have absolutely no take on who or what is going on. The incohesive nature of this film does not allow for anyone to become invested with the story as they are attempting to catch up for the hour-and-a-half runtime. This film jumps from place to place and people to people, so much that I was having to play catch-up for most of the film. There is a time in this film where Kristen Stewart finds a station and goes in and decides to wash off in the shower while people are outside in the water with little oxygen. It made me wonder and hope that we were seeing this through flashbacks, but then we find out that this is all done in time. The only thing that held this film from not being worst of the worst was the somewhat decent visuals, and the score, even though it was overdone, was perfectly fine. Other than that, I cannot find one redeeming quality in this film. The direction was stylish, but it was style over substance in such a way that the film became a chore to watch. It was dwindled down to a strict horror slasher sci-fi film, and even when it seems to be stripped to the bare bones, it still does not even accomplish that. The scares are predictable, the thrills are boring, and the adventure seems to get further from their destination. Quite literally, a ticker in the bottom right corner shows their distance, and each time it pops up, they have gone further from where they need to go. What sucks even more so than anything is the fact that this could have been a good movie. 2017's Alethea had the same basic structure. Crew on a ship in a deadly environment have to escape organisms that will kill them. Everything was like right there in front of them. But what Adolofia did well that this film did not was to make the monster so simple that it could remain terrifying throughout the film. In Underwater, the monsters we see get bigger and bigger, to the point where it almost seems like a Joker, where we have ended up. There was something there, but I should not have expected more than a January film. Readers of this modest little site probably know I have a soft spot for all kinds of science fiction. That even includes movies like Underwater, a sci-fi horror-esque survival mashup from director William Eubank. The movie follows a pretty familiar path. Survivors find themselves trapped after a catastrophic event and must find a way to escape. Of course, they won't all make it out. They never do win these things. But who survives and who doesn't? That is the question. Underwater isn't all that interested in setup or background. It opens with a series of images and reports that tell us a giant corporation is drilling for resources on the ocean floor deep down in the crescent-shaped Mariana Trench. From there, the movie wastes no time getting going. We are immediately dropped nearly 7 miles below the ocean's surface, where we meet Nora. She's played by Kristen Stewart with cropped blonde hair, almost as if she were prepping for a Gene Sabrick biopic. Nora is a mechanical engineer living and working on the Kepler 822 deep sea station. Within a minute of actually screen time, she begins hearing strange noises, which are never a good sign. In an instant, the hull of the facility begins to crack, and Pacific Ocean water gushes in at every seam. Nora instinctually springs into action, sprinting towards a hub where she is joined by a tech named Rodrigo Mayo-Taai. The two seal off the hub and begin their search for other survivors. The entire opening sequence is tense, energetic, even a bit thrilling. Nora and Rodrigo eventually meet up with a handful of other station dwellers. Several of them fit particular types common to those movies. The stoic Captain Vincent Cassel and a terrified young technician who everyone tries to keep calm, Jessica Henwick, and the U-worthy comic relief T.J. Miller before his litany of bad behavior had surfaced. None of the characters really develop past what you first see, although Stewart deserves credit. She works hard to bring a welcome vulnerability to Nora, who turns out to be a tough woman, but a very human one as well. While the movie starts strong, it's hampered by a hit-or-miss midsection. Way too much time is spent walking along the ocean floor in the dark, murky waters. At first, the tension is thick as the survivors come face to face with the harsh environment, while an unknown and unseen predator prowls around in the shadows. But it eventually runs its course, and so much time in the water leads to several instances of undecipherable effects. Shots! Underwater gets back on track in the third act, where it fully embraces its eye creature feature influences. Unfortunately, the story doesn't get any deeper and some character motivations are still a little muddled. But for a movie that languished in development purgatory for 3 years following Disney's acquisition of 20th Century Fox, it ends up being a fun, although shallow, horrible pun intended popcorn genre flick. There are some who, for whatever reason, have zero tolerance for these kinds of movies. Perhaps it's the redundancy of ideas or the predictable story structures. Maybe it's the stock characters or their lack of depth. Those gripes aren't without merit, but that doesn't mean there isn't fun to have with these genre pictures. All of those things describe Underwater to a T. It's not all that original, and it has some character issues. At the same time, it's a fun deep-sea survival romp that essentially delivers on its promises. Most horror movies set underwater are really clones of sci-fi space movies, trading one kind of killer environment for another. A desperate crew, and they seem to only use the word desperate when describing these kinds of films that must face potential disaster and an interior threat while being unable to escape due to the exterior conditions. The thing I have always liked about the underwater monster movie is that the creatures are part of that environmental threat. Getting out of your ship in a spacesuit always seemed like a real way to escape in a film set in space. In an underwater creature feature, it's just frying pan greater than fire. Given that these are often shoring affairs with cheesy monsters and special effects, I give them more leeway, especially if they have a sense of humor or awareness about what kind of movie they are. Hello, a Deep Star 6. A good monster goes a long way. 2, the plot doesn't need to be complicated or deep. Sorry. Again, I just want some thrills and chills and to care at least a little about the characters before they're eaten. Underwater starts off with a bang, introducing us to obviously damaged Nora, Kristen Stewart, only moments before disaster strikes. There are some introductory elements during the credits, essentially explaining the setup of underwater drill-side Kepler-Marianas Trench 6 miles down Yada. Yada, yada, butt goes by fast, still better than a voiceover. Then water explodes into the set, and Nora is running for her life, picking up other survivors on the way, as they all try to stay alive, long enough to get to an abandoned facility and call for a rescue. Underwater feels familiar. It's by way of with disaster and monsters threatening in equal measure. The small and desperate. There it is. Again, crew is also a page taken from those films with comic relief. Paul D.J. Miller's strong and loyal leader, Lucy and Vincent Cassel. Lovers Liam and Emily John Gallagher Jr., and Jessica Henwick and Cephalus Rodrigo. Mayday! Don't get attached to any of them. Don't worry, it won't be hard day. While the actors are decent, they're given so little opportunity to interact, and non-action moments that they're all ciphers defined by clip dialogue and backgrounds so tragic that make you wonder why any company would employ such damaged people in such a stressful situation. As the Kepler continues its slow implosion, the survivors realize that they'll have to travel across the open abyssal plain of the Marianas Trench in order to get to a abandoned pilot drill platform. One of them will be sacrificed to show us that pressure at 6 miles down is serious. They'll bring a mysterious creature into their safe space because that always goes well, and they'll be forced to swim under an obstruction with something in the water with them, because every disaster movie, Cynthia the Poseidon adventure area has that scene. Its tradition underwater looks great with excellent set and costume design. Love. Those suits, as well as sharp cinematography by Bojan Bousli. I would have appreciated a little more clarity in some of the underwater scenes. Everything is lit up like a Christmas tree. So why is it so hard to see anything? But that could be down to editing. The monsters are appropriately creepy and slimy looking, if a little too humanoid for me, especially given what the young look like. The pacing is fast enough to qualify as frenetic, and the sound design amplifies the suspense. 10. General Underwater gives me the bones I'm looking for in a deep-sea creature feature with good monsters, and a great setting as well as constant pressure and action, but it never quite connects. Part of that is down to the lean running time, which pares character interaction down in favor of jumps, action, and monsters. I do appreciate the way things never seem to slow down, but I feel like the film needs 10 more minutes of hell. 5 more minutes, say a character development and interaction. The usual shortcuts don't even have enough time here. For example, there's a character carrying a bunny that is supposed to be an emotional touchstone, but by the time it showed up at the end, I'd forgotten whose bunny it was. And a couple of moon pie references don't pay off at all. The actors are all good, and Kristen Stewart works as an action movie star, but they don't have much to work with. The second part of why I'm not invested is that the movie is not much fun. It's a monster movie, but it approaches everything with a level of sincerity and seriousness that doesn't seem advisable, given that it also includes T.J. Miller and moon pie references. If you were more connected to the characters, it might work. But as they're not given enough time and material to develop, the seriousness just weighs down the things you do get, which are disasters and monsters. There are details available in the background and in small moments of dialogue. There's a hint, for instance, that this isn't the first time the drilling company has encountered problems at the dig site, but they're few and forgotten quickly in the rush of action. Given that director William Eubank, The Signal, didn't even decide on its Lovecraftian nature until after wrapping principal photography. As with most monster movies, there are attacks and setbacks and survivors and sacrifices. It all feels a bit familiar, but that's not a bad thing. I just wish it had embraced the monster movie part of its DNA. Given her hardly critically celebrated launch into stardom through The Pain at a Twilight Saga, it's superb to see Kristen Stewart and colleague Robert Pattinson proving herself a rather underestimated player, impressively bearing both body and soul for a number of independent features, including a pair of challenging Olivia AI's movies and also managing to stand out and do something a little different, even in deeply generic and largely vapid mainstream fare like the Charlies. Angela reboot Underwater affords her Sigourney Weaver, Alan Ripley, alien-esque role, and even within the confines of B-movie sci-fi survival horror, she manages to bring something new to the character, carrying the formulaic but entertaining feature almost single-handedly as a plumbs the depths of every memorable genre entry you can possibly think of. After a deep-sea research and drilling facility set up way down at the bottom of the Mariana Trench gets struck by an earthquake. Tech expert and mechanical engineer Nora Price fights her way through the imploding station to find all the escape pods used or damaged, and has to band together with a small group of survivors to get to a satellite station and access their pods as the facility collapses around them, and various underwater entities conspire to make the trek across the ocean floor even more deadly. Underwater both admirably and perhaps ill-advisedly jumps straight into the mayhem, deciding to unravel the disaster first and the character second, as the earthquake erupts and sends Stewart's engineer crawling, running, and grunting her way across the fully destructible environment within moments of being introduced to her. Certainly the top 95-minute runtime leaves it an efficiently tense ride, but it does come at the expense of getting to know these red shirts as they traverse the claustrophobic quarters or take that deadly walk across the Seabury and are inevitably picked off one by one, with Stewart still doing her best to bring something different to the mix. And aside from perhaps the ever-watchable Vincent Cassel, Recently great Teen Westworld Season 3 remaining likely the only cast member who stands out in any way, shape, or form. There's also Jessica Henwick, Marvel's Iron Fist, TJ Jupp, Miller, Deadpool 2, and John Gallagher Jr., recently Ina Amazon's Modern Love. But it's Stewart who keeps her head above the water. Dot, it helps that she's got a distinctive look. Bleached blonde, shaven head, and at least initially glasses. And she's absolutely ripped for the role, which helps when called upon to run around in her underwear for the duration. Gratuitous, but possibly understandable given the location and the suits they're hopping in and out of. But Stewart also delivers more than what you'd expect from this kind of B-movie genre fare, attempting a little distinction in her thankless role and just about achieving it. Budgeted around $80 million. The effects mostly stand up, with a couple of great slow-mo sequences bookending the piece. Unfortunately, a stylistic tactic not employed more often. In the runtime, and some solid underwater hijinks which get the job done. The pressure suits are pleasantly futuristic, and the setting expansive, giving you a real sense of a vast underwater complex to explore. It's not Alien, it's no Abyssite, and it's not even a pitch black, primarily because you cared far more about the characters in all of those. But the relatively unusual setting, effective disaster tension, and Stewart's sleep performance carry you along for the eventful ride, even throwing some last-minute H.P. Lovecraft into the mix as the finale opens up some Pacific Rim-esque mayhem. If you didn't catch it at the cinemas, don't be put off by the negative reviews. It's worth checking out, particularly in 4K with Dolby Vision. I did unfortunately feel like I'd seen this movie before. The deep underwater setting may be a bit different, but it plays out like so many Alien movies do. It's certainly a watchable film, and it has a pretty good cast, but it's a movie that's sort of lacking in personality. That is, when the movie isn't shoving bad T.J. Miller comic relief in our face, then it has a personality, but a bad personality. I will say that this movie is pretty well paced. Things get started right away, and we get some exposition far later. It takes a while to get to any monsters, and the movie works better at this point, because once we get the monsters, they're nothing special. Kristen Stewart does an alright job as the protagonist. There isn't too much to her character, but it's enough for a movie like this. Recently released to digital, Underwater is a science fiction horror movie from director William Eubank. The movie stars Kristen Stewart, Vincent Cassel, TJ Miller, and tells the story of a deep-sea research and drilling crew who encounter mysterious creatures at the bottom of the ocean. Across the course of the 95-minute movie, monsters rear their ugly heads, the lighting gets dark and moody, and crew numbers dwindle. There's also hints of a sinister company doing something a gay hell. Broken Bar era. Broken Bar sinister. And there is a scene in which the lead character strats around in her pants for no real reason. If you think this all sounds a bit like the classic 1979 sci-fi horror Ina, you would be very, very correct. From its basic premise and its visual aesthetic, right through to the lead hero spending time in her aunties, Underwater is essentially an aquatic take on the beloved movie. I always encourage everyone and anyone to watch Alina and its 1986 sequel, Aliens. But you still have to find time for something else, right? After all, so many films have borrowed from Elena over the years. I'm inclined to at least judge this movie on what it brings to the table. So putting Thea-Elena comparisons to one side for a moment, let me take the opportunity to say a few positives. Underwater is a fairly slick-looking movie with decent performances from the cast, especially Kristen Stewart. The effects are good, the dank, murky depths of the ocean setting at an air of menace to proceedings, and the creatures are suitably creepy. Visually, Eubank has made a solid film. While I wouldn't want to live in this movie, all that seawater would be murder on my hair. I really enjoyed the look and feel of what was presented. And I think there is a lot of potential here to develop an interesting world. The movie wastes no time getting into the action. We get a Brief introduction to Nora Kristen Stewart at Light Lizzie. She is a mechanical engineer on a deep-sea drilling rig, starting her work shift while most of the crew sleep in their bunks. What are they drilling for? It doesn't seem to matter much, except that they are drilling into the deepest sections of the abyss. This, of course, will lead to nothing but trouble. This is the same setup. Also the Abyss, Deep Star, Six Leviathan, and Asphere Broken Bar, all of which pay serious homage, of course, to Aina, and by extension, other Thing. This Step Ocean Station Keeper 822 has over 300 people working on it, but right after the introductory monologue, things go okay blue. Now, you don't have to worry about most of those crew. Few. The producers saved that casting budget as bulkheads fail, corridors flood, and the containment fails. Nora connects with fellow survivor Rodrigo May to a circle. They scramble for safety when they rescue Paul DJ Miller at Deadpool, Silicon Valley. After struggling through the flooding wreck, they reunite with Captain Lucy and Vincent Cassel, a black swan biologist, Emily Jessica Hanna, Iron Fist The Force Awakens, and engineer Liam Smith John Gallagher Jr. A hush, the Bellew experiment. The station is 70% ruined and on the verge of complete collapse. Was it an earthquake? It's possible. Unfortunately, all communications have been cut off from the surface, so nobody knows much of anything. Further bad news, all of the working escape pods have launched. It becomes clear that what the survivors need to do is cross the bottom of the Marianas Trench to reach the gigantic Robu drilling rig. No big thing, it's only a mile-long trek across the pitch-black seafloor with monsters. The short planning respite ends and the anxious crew gears up into huge mech underwater suits, which look very impressive. They remind me of something out of StarCraft or Warhammer 20,000 for those gamer types in the know. This feature has fantastic production value and is a testament to the prop designers and the actors that these suits work well. Once the team descends into the abyss, things go from horrible to hellish. The station is coming apart at the seams above them, dropping massive structural components that threaten to flatten them. Some of the suits are lightly damaged while they hold up to the crushing abyssal depths. They take their chances and head for the seafloor and the broken bar monsters. This is one of those movies that holds the monsters back for a good long while. That disturbed seafloor has turned a lot of debris in the water, and the silty background makes visibility lousy. And guess what? There are creepy things in the water, and they are extremely aggressive. There are various species, some vaguely humanoid, but also with bits of manta, squid, and piranha mixed in. You never really get a good look at them, but the addition of the monsters, of course, forces the crew to pick up the pace and change their strategies. Like most movies of this type, it is a dwindling crew scenario. It is an environment where everything out there threatens to end your life. The movie alternates between the abyssal plane and places of periodic refuge, but the simple plot marches briskly. When you reach the conclusion, there is a jaw-dropping reveal that unveils something out of popular lore. I dare not say much more other than I audibly cheered. The closing sequences lend some notion that perhaps the drilling company just might be Broken Bar Cult. That's my take, and I'm running with it. This is a pure popcorn movie. There isn't much drama apart from the strong and pervasive desire to escape, and there isn't a jerk antagonist amongst the crew that often plagues these types of movies. Unfortunately, that does lend itself to a little generic flavoring to the crew. It is often hard to remember their names during the movie. Kristen Stewart does a fine job portraying a tough and capable heroine, but even her lead character has the roughest skeleton of personality. For those of you hung up about Kristen Stewart's Twilight past, please see Broken Bar. Get over it. Character development in Underwater is thin. Smith and Emily are smitten, and that the captain and Nora have a good platonic history together. But that's all you are given for character development. TJ Miller is there for comic relief, and he has his moments, but he's not as good as he is in a Deadpool. Dot as running gag with a stuffed bunny was a little touch that I did appreciate. The script could have added backstories, but this is a solid cast. These are a pro group of actors holding down their roles. I am a fan of creature features. I will always be on board for a good underwater genre film, and I appreciate how hard it is to make an underwater movie, so I am prone to giving such movies the benefit of the doubt. This film thrilled me for a straight set designs, tension, and pressure in so many ways. I'm certain that most of the water effects were done in post, but I never felt the presence of CGI except for the long shots of the station and drill rig where your mind knows that such things do not exist. Underwater actually manages to escape the PG-13 curse. It offers up more real scares than the Mega, which is a bit of a guilty pleasure for me. But whereas last year's big shark movie pulled its punches on the visceral scares, Underwater delivers real dread and is better than most in this type of film, even without much gore. The characters don't take hugely foolish actions or behave boorishly. You root for all of them to make it out alive. I would have appreciated it if they didn't resort to the PG-13 violin shriek jump scare. In a movie that is this dark and this ominous, you don't need a blaring audible jump scare. It takes me out of the movie when overused. Is it derivative? Sure. If it's well done, horror fans can be forgiving of the familiar. If I were to tell you that this movie was on par with Pitch Black and Panda, would that interest you? Those would be good comparable films in style, tone, and performance. This does not achieve the high eufans. However, I would suggest that Underwater is better than any of the later films in the Alina franchise. Stay tuned for a dead list of ocean-based horror films. Such inspiration. I fear that because Fox unloaded this movie when it did and didn't make a big media push for it. This film will be a box office dud. It deserves far better. If you are a creature feature or action horror fan, I have to suggest that you go out and support fare like this on the big screen so we can get more like it. Perhaps, since it opens at a time with little competition, it might do well. You can always hope. And some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.